Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be talking all about middle childhood today, that really interesting period between ages 6 and 11.
Yeah, it's amazing how much development happens during those years.
Right. And we've got a ton of sources to dig into, textbook chapters, research summaries, all kinds of stuff.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Our mission is to basically pull out the coolest and most helpful info about this stage of life, help our listeners really grasp those huge leaps kids make physically, in their thinking, and socially.
Lots of aha moments, I bet.
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
I know I had a few just reading through the material. Okay, for starters, get this. A 10-year-old today is like 18 pounds heavier on average than a 10-year-old was just 40 years ago. Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's pretty significant. It really highlights the trend we're seeing globally with childhood obesity.
It's kind of scary, right? Why such a huge change in such a short time?
Well, it's complicated. Genes definitely play a role, but so do the changes in our environment.
So it's not just nature, it's nurture too.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Fast food, supersized portions, marketing aimed at kids. It's a whole different food landscape than what earlier generations had to deal with.
Plus all the screen time. Kids aren't running around outside as much as they used to.
Right, less physical activity is definitely a factor. So you put all these environmental shifts together, and yeah, it's not surprising we're seeing this global rise in childhood obesity.
So it's kind of like a perfect storm, huh? And I'm guessing it has some serious consequences.
Yeah, unfortunately. Childhood obesity puts kids at greater risk for a whole bunch of health problems, heart disease, diabetes, orthopedic issues, you name it.
Wow. So while their bodies might be struggling a bit, their brains are developing like crazy during this time, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
The brain isn't necessarily getting bigger, but it's going through this incredible process of refinement. We call it gray matter pruning.
Pruning, like you do with a rose bush.
It's a good analogy, actually. Think of the brain like a sculptor, carefully chiseling away unnecessary connections between neurons. It makes the whole network more efficient and powerful.
So getting rid of those connections is actually a good thing.
Absolutely. It helps with focus and attention. Those extra connections are like distractions.
Uh, so that's why kids this age can finally sit still and concentrate for longer.
Exactly. It's thanks in part to this amazing brain remodeling.
That's pretty cool. I'm guessing there's a catch though, right? Like it takes a lot of energy or something.
Well, you could say that. This intense brain development makes sleep super important. Kids between 6 and 11, they need 9 to 11 hours of sleep every night.
Wow, so all those bedtime battles are actually brain-building exercises in disguise.
Pretty much, sleep fuels this neurological transformation. So making sure kids get enough shut-eye is absolutely crucial.
Got it. Now, speaking of fuel, our sources also talk about how important nutrition is during this stage. They mention kids needing between 1,400 and 2,600 calories a day, but they stress it's not just about the number of calories, it's about the quality.
Right, it's like building a house. You wouldn't use cheap materials, would you? Same goes for fueling a growing body and brain.
So what are the good building blocks we should be focusing on?
Nutrient-rich foods. Lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein. That's where kids get the complex carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals they need to grow and develop properly.
And what about all that processed food and sugary snacks? It's everywhere these days.
Well, that's like using those cheap building materials. Some studies suggest that a diet high in processed foods, sugar, and unhealthy fats can actually hurt brain development.
Seriously, junk food can make kids less smart.
There's definitely some evidence pointing in that direction. Those highly processed foods don't give the brain what it needs to thrive, and some might even interfere with healthy brain development.
Whoa, I'm definitely going to rethink my snack choices from now on.
It's definitely worth paying attention to. We're learning more all the time about how food affects the developing brain.
Okay, well, let's move on from food and talk about what kids are doing when they're not in school or eating. Our sources describe some interesting differences in how boys and girls play.
Yeah, boys tend to play in larger groups and gravitate toward those more competitive rough and tumble games.
So, lots of energy and figuring out who's the boss.
Exactly. They're testing their physical limits, establishing hierarchies, that kind of thing.
What about girls? Do they get in on the roughhousing too?
Not as much. They usually prefer smaller, more intimate groups. Their play is more cooperative and focused on building those close relationships.
So it's like they're practicing for those social interactions that will be so important later on.
Right. Learning to share, cooperate, work through disagreements, all that good stuff.
Makes sense. But our deep dive also uncovered a less fun side to this age group. I'm talking about the rise of childhood obesity. It's a pretty serious issue, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a global epidemic, and it has some pretty significant consequences.
Our sources mention that obesity rates have gone way up all over the world, and it's not just about how it looks, it's about those health risks we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Childhood obesity increases the risk of all kinds of health problems, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, even sleep apnea.
It's more serious than I realized.
It is, and it's a complex problem with lots of contributing factors: genes, diet, inactivity. It's not a simple fix, that's for sure.
Okay, so let's move on from those growing bodies and talk about those developing minds. Our sources went into Piaget's theory of cognitive development, specifically that concrete operational stage.
Right, right. That's where kids' thinking starts to get a lot more logical and organized.
So they're moving past that magical thinking of early childhood.
Exactly. They start thinking more like little scientists. They can understand cause and effect. They can classify and categorize things, and they have a more realistic view of the world.
Yeah, I remember reading about that experiment with the clay.
Ah, the conservation of mass experiment.
Yeah.
So you show a kid two balls of clay, right? And then you roll one of them out into a long sausage
And
shape.
then you ask them if the two pieces still have the same amount of clay, right?
Yep. And younger kids, they'll often say the sausage has more clay because it looks longer.
But kids in this concrete operational stage get it. They understand that the amount of clay hasn't changed even though the shape has.
Exactly. They've grasped the concept of conservation.
So they're not just fooled by appearances anymore. They can see those underlying principles.
Right. And this understanding of conservation, it applies to other things too, like volume and number. They can understand that pouring liquid into a taller, narrower glass doesn't change the amount of liquid.
That's pretty amazing. Sounds like their brains are really making some big leaps forward.
They are. And it's not just about conservation. Their memory gets better, their information processing speeds up, and they even start to understand their own memory processes.
That's called metamemory, right?
Yeah. They become more aware of how their own mind works.
Okay, so they're thinking better, remembering more, and focusing better. What about learning new stuff? Our sources had this fun section on mnemonic devices, those memory tricks we all use.
Oh, yeah, those are great. It's like we're tapping into our natural cognitive abilities to make learning more effective.
Totally. I still remember learning, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally for the order of operations in math.
A classic. And there are so many others. ROYGBIV for the colors of the rainbow. Every good boy does fine for the musical notes. These little tricks help us organize information and make it stick.
It's like creating mental shortcuts. Now, we can't forget about IQ, which can be a bit of a controversial topic. Our sources mention that IQ tests can predict how well a kid will do in school, but they also acknowledge that these tests aren't perfect.
Right, they tend to focus on a pretty narrow range of abilities, mostly language and logic.
So they don't really capture the whole picture of a child's intelligence.
Exactly. That's where Howard Gardner's idea of multiple intelligences comes in. He said there are at least 8 different types of intelligence, things like musical intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, even interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence.
That makes a lot more sense. It means everyone has their own unique strengths, right?
Precisely. We all have different talents and ways of learning.
It makes you wonder if we need to rethink how we measure intelligence in schools.
I agree. Maybe we need learning environments that nurture a wider range of intelligences. Give all kids a chance to shine.
I love that. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about social development. Our sources highlighted how important peer relationships become during middle childhood.
Yeah, peer groups become like a major influence. They offer kids a sense of belonging, help them figure out their identity, and provide social support.
It's like they're creating their own little societies with their own rules and social hierarchies and everything.
Exactly. They're learning to navigate those complex social dynamics to figure out how to make friends, where they fit in, all of that.
And our sources mention that different types of popularity emerge. Some kids are popular because they're genuinely well-liked. They're kind, helpful, good at socializing. But then there are others who might become popular for less healthy reasons, like being aggressive or manipulative.
Right. And sadly, there are always kids who end up being rejected or neglected by their peers. Those kids might be shy, withdrawn, or just lack the social skills to fit in.
And that can be really tough on a kid's self-esteem. Our sources were pretty upfront about how devastating bullying can be for both the victims and the bullies themselves.
It's a heartbreaking reality and a serious problem. We need to be talking about it more openly and honestly. Bullying can take so many forms: physical, verbal, relational, and now, with technology, cyberbullying.
And the consequences can be really severe, right? It's not just about hurt feelings. It can lead to anxiety,
Mm.
depression, low self-esteem, problems in school, even
Yeah.
suicidal
And the
thoughts.
bullies, they're often struggling too. They might have problems at home or be dealing with their own emotional issues.
So it's a lose-lose situation. Everyone gets hurt.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to address bullying head on. We need to create school environments where it's absolutely not tolerated, teach kids how to resolve conflicts peacefully, and empower bystanders to speak up if they see something happening.
We need to build a culture of kindness and respect. Speaking of which, our deep dive also touched on the topic of mental health in middle childhood. It's a reminder that even young kids can face real mental health challenges.
That's right. Conditions like disruptive behavior disorders, anxiety, even depression, these are all too common, even at this age.
And it seems like so many things can contribute to these mental health problems.
Oh, absolutely. Stress at home, poverty, bullying, academic pressure. They can all take a toll on a child's emotional well-being.
So it's crucial for parents, teachers, and caregivers to be on the lookout for any signs of mental health problems and to get professional help if needed.
Early intervention is key. The sooner we can address these issues, the better the chances of helping kids develop those coping skills and build resilience.
Speaking of resilience, our deep dive also explored that amazing ability some kids have to bounce back from tough times.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Some kids just seem to thrive no matter what obstacles they face.
So what makes these kids so resilient? What's their secret?
Well, our sources pointed to a few key factors. Things like strong family relationships, a positive self-image, good problem-solving skills, and a sense of hope for the future.
So it's a combination of inner strength and a good support system.
Exactly. It's not just about individual grit. It's about having those caring adults in their lives who can provide guidance and encouragement.
And our sources pointed out that all kids can benefit from developing resilience, even if they haven't faced major challenges yet.
Absolutely. It's a skill set that can help them navigate the ups and downs of life, no matter what comes their way.
So how can we help kids build that resilience?
Well, we can start by creating nurturing and supportive environments where kids feel safe, loved, and valued. We can teach them how to solve problems, encourage a positive outlook, and help them build strong connections with others.
It sounds like a lot of this comes down to good parenting.
Well, parents definitely play a big role, but it's not just on them. Teachers, coaches, mentors, anyone who interacts with kids can contribute to building that resilience.
It takes a village, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a collective effort to create a world where kids can thrive, even when things get tough.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the physical, cognitive, and social changes that shape middle childhood, and we've touched on some of the challenges and triumphs that come with this stage.
It's been a pretty amazing journey so far.
It has, but we're not done yet. In our next segment, we're going to delve even deeper into the world of middle childhood. We'll be talking about things like moral development, gender identity, and the impact of culture and media. Stay tuned. There's much more to discover.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into middle childhood. Last time, we were talking about resilience and how important it is for kids to develop that ability to bounce back from tough times.
It's really crucial, especially as they start navigating the world more independently and facing those new social challenges.
Right. And speaking of social challenges, our sources talked a lot about the role of peer groups in middle childhood. They become so important, don't they? It's like their own little training ground for all those social skills they'll need later in life.
Yeah, it's like a mini society where they're figuring out how to interact with others, make friends, deal with conflict, and establish their place in the group.
And our sources pointed out that there are different types of popularity that can emerge in these peer groups. Some kids are popular because they're genuinely nice and have good social skills, but others might gain popularity through less desirable ways, like being aggressive or manipulative.
That's right. And then there are the kids who struggle to fit in, the ones who get rejected or ignored by their peers.
And that can be really hard on a kid's self-esteem. Our sources also talked about the serious issue of bullying and how damaging it can be for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Bullying is a huge problem, and it's something we need to be talking about more openly and honestly. Whether it's physical, verbal, or relational bullying, or that cyberbullying that's so prevalent now, the consequences can be devastating.
It's not just about hurt feelings. Bullying can lead to anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, problems in school. It can even lead to suicidal thoughts in some cases.
And the bullies themselves often have their own problems that they're dealing with. They might be struggling at home or with their own emotional
This
issues.
is a lose-lose situation. It hurts everyone involved.
Exactly. That's why it's so crucial to address bullying head-on. We need to create school environments where it's simply not tolerated, teach kids conflict resolution skills, and empower those bystanders to step in and say something if they see bullying happening.
It's about creating a culture of empathy and respect. Which brings us to another important topic our deep dive covered: mental health in middle childhood. It's a good reminder that even young kids can experience real mental health challenges.
Absolutely. We tend to think of childhood as this carefree time. But the reality is that kids can struggle with anxiety, depression, and behavioral issues just like adults do.
It's important for parents, teachers, everyone who works with kids to be aware of that and know how to recognize the signs of these issues.
Early intervention is key. The sooner we can address these challenges, the better the outcomes for these kids.
Speaking of positive outcomes, our sources had a lot to say about resilience, that amazing ability to bounce back from difficult situations. Some kids just seem to handle stress and adversity so much better than others.
It's incredible, isn't it? And the research has actually identified some key factors that contribute to resilience. Things like having strong family relationships, a positive self-image, good problem-solving skills, and that sense of hope for the future.
So it sounds like it's a combination of internal strengths and external support.
Exactly. It's not just about being tough or having grit. It's also about having a supportive network of caring adults in your life, people who can offer guidance and encouragement.
And the good news is that our sources emphasize that resilience can be learned and nurtured.
That's right. It's not something you're just born with. We can help kids develop the skills and the mindset they need to be more resilient.
Well, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about cognitive development. We were discussing earlier how kids in middle childhood become much more logical in their thinking. Our sources also talked about how memory develops during this stage and how their capacity for learning just explodes.
Right, their memory capacity expands significantly during these years. It's like their mental filing cabinets are getting bigger and more organized.
They're becoming much better at storing and retrieving information.
Exactly. And they're also developing metamemory, which is the ability to think about their own thinking. They become more aware of how their memory works and can start to use strategies to improve it.
Like those mnemonic devices we were talking about earlier.
Right. Things like using acronyms or rhymes to remember lists or facts.
Those little tricks can be so helpful. Okay, now let's touch on a topic that often generates a lot of discussion and debate: IQ. Our sources pointed out that while IQ tests can predict academic achievement, they also have their limitations.
That's right. Traditional IQ tests tend to focus on a very specific set of skills, primarily verbal and logical reasoning.
So they might not be capturing the full picture of a child's intelligence.
Exactly. And that's where Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences comes in. He proposed that there are at least 8 different types of intelligence, including musical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, and naturalistic intelligence.
So we all have our own unique strengths and talents.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all concept.
I think that's a really important message, especially when we think about education. Maybe we need to create learning environments that value and nurture all these different types of intelligence.
I agree. We need to help all kids discover and develop their unique abilities.
Well said. Now let's circle back to the social world of middle childhood. We were discussing the importance of peer relationships earlier and how kids are constantly navigating those complex social dynamics.
It's like they're learning a whole new language, the language of social interaction.
And it's not always easy, is it? There are cliques and hierarchies and all sorts of unspoken rules.
Right. And some kids are better at navigating those rules than others.
Our sources talked about different types of popularity and how some kids are well-liked because they're kind and have good social skills, while others might gain popularity through more negative behaviors like being aggressive or manipulative.
That's right. And unfortunately, some kids end up being rejected or neglected by their peers, which can be a really painful experience.
And that can make them more vulnerable to bullying, which is a problem we definitely need to address. Our sources really emphasize the harmful effects of bullying, both for the victims and for the bullies themselves.
Bullying is never okay. It's harmful and can have long-lasting consequences for everyone involved.
It can lead to anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and even worse.
And the bullies often have their own issues they're dealing with. It's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted approach.
We need to create school environments where bullying is not tolerated, teach kids how to resolve conflicts peacefully, and empower bystanders to step in and speak up when they see something happening.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of kindness and respect where everyone feels safe and valued.
And speaking of emotional well-being, our deep dive also touched on the issue of mental health in middle childhood.
Right. It's a reminder that even young kids can experience mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, and behavioral issues.
It's not always easy to recognize the signs, but it's so important that we do.
Absolutely. Early intervention is crucial. The sooner we can address these issues, the better the chances of a positive outcome.
And one of the most encouraging things that emerged from our deep dive was the concept of resilience, that ability to bounce back from adversity.
It's truly remarkable to see how some kids can thrive even in the face of significant challenges.
And research has shown that there are things we can do to foster resilience in children.
That's right. It's not something they're just born with. We can teach them coping skills, help them build a positive self-image, and create supportive environments where they feel loved and valued.
So it's a combination of internal strengths and external support.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even though middle childhood can be a challenging time, it's also a time of incredible growth and potential.
Well said. Now, let's move on to another fascinating aspect of middle childhood, the development of moral reasoning. Our sources pointed out that this is the stage where kids start to move beyond those rigid, rule-based ideas about right and wrong that they had in early childhood.
Right, they start to develop a more nuanced understanding of morality. They begin to consider the intentions behind actions, the perspectives of others, and the gray areas in between.
So it's not just about following the rules anymore. It's about understanding why the rules exist and developing their own internal compass.
Exactly. It's a really important step in their moral development.
And our sources also talked about how gender identity develops during middle childhood. It's a time when kids become more aware of societal expectations and stereotypes around gender.
Right, they're absorbing messages from everywhere, their families, their peers, the media, and society in general about what it means to be a boy or a girl.
And those messages can be pretty limiting sometimes.
Absolutely. We need to be challenging those rigid gender stereotypes and creating environments where kids feel free to express themselves authentically, regardless of gender.
We need to let boys be sensitive and girls be assertive if that's who they are.
Exactly. It's about embracing individuality and encouraging kids to explore the full spectrum of human expression.
Now, we can't talk about middle childhood without acknowledging the huge influence of media and technology. It's everywhere, and it's shaping kids' views of the world in so many ways.
It's a powerful force. It can be a source of information and entertainment, but it can also expose kids to harmful content and unrealistic expectations.
Our sources emphasize the importance of media literacy, helping kids develop the skills to critically evaluate the messages they're receiving from media and to make informed choices about what they consume.
Right. We need to teach them how to be savvy consumers of media, not just passive recipients.
We need to give them the tools to navigate the digital landscape safely and responsibly.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing conversation that involves parents, educators, and the media industry itself.
Well, as we wrap up this second part of our deep dive, I think it's safe to say that middle childhood is a pretty amazing time. It's a period of incredible growth and change, physically, cognitively, socially, and emotionally.
It's a time when kids are really coming into their own, developing their sense of self, figuring out their place in the world.
And it's our job as adults to support them on that journey, to provide them with the love, guidance, and resources they need to thrive.
Absolutely. And to create a world where they can grow up feeling safe, valued, and empowered.
Beautifully said. We'll be back after a short break to wrap up our exploration of middle childhood and look ahead to what comes next, that exciting and often challenging transition to adolescence.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into middle childhood. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have. From brain development to social dynamics to resilience, it's been a fascinating journey.
Absolutely. It really makes you appreciate just how much is happening in those few short years between ages 6 and 11. So much growth and change.
Yeah, they're really laying the groundwork for who they'll become as teenagers and adults.
Right. And as we wrap up, I want to focus on the crucial roles that family and school play during this stage. Kids need so much support as they navigate all these changes.
Absolutely. Family and school are like the two pillars of their world, providing stability, guidance, and a sense of belonging.
Our sources talked a lot about the importance of a stable and nurturing home environment where kids feel loved and accepted unconditionally. It makes such a difference. That feeling of security and belonging gives them the confidence to explore, take risks, and learn from their mistakes.
And it's not just about basic needs like food and shelter, right? It's about creating a positive emotional climate where kids feel comfortable expressing themselves and being their true selves.
Exactly. It's about fostering open communication, respect, and empathy, making sure kids know they're loved no matter what.
So important. And what about the role of school?
School's a big one too, of course. It's where kids develop so many skills, academic, social, and emotional. It's where they learn to interact with peers, follow rules, and navigate those complex social dynamics.
It's like a microcosm of society.
It is. And our sources really emphasize the need for schools to create learning environments that are stimulating and supportive. Places where kids feel challenged but not overwhelmed, where their curiosity is nurtured and they feel safe to take risks.
I love that idea of a classroom where kids feel excited about learning, not just pressured to get good grades.
Right. It's about fostering a love of learning and helping them discover their passions and talents.
And equipping them with the skills and knowledge they'll need to succeed in life.
Exactly. So much happens during those middle childhood years. It's amazing to think about.
It really is. Well, I think we've covered just about everything. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Just that it's such a privilege to witness this stage of development. It's a time of incredible growth and discovery, and it's full of those little moments of wonder that remind us why we love working with kids.
I agree. And I hope our listeners have gained a deeper appreciation for the amazing things happening in those middle childhood years. It's a time to be celebrated, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, we'll bring our deep dive to a close. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey into the world of middle childhood.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, happy learning, everyone.